All right, what's up, folks? We are back. DraftKings MMA DFS. This time it's UFC 264 pay-per-view event. We got the card, best bets, picks, lineup advice, FanDuel tips, you name it. McGregor versus Poirier 3, the trilogy. Everyone's excited for it. We're here to give you everything you need to know for the card, gambling, DFS, lineups, you name it. We're here, and we'll be here for about 30 minutes or so. So we're actually doing this on Saturday evening. Normally we do this, Friday evening. Normally we do this Saturday afternoons. A little bit of a schedule change this week, so we'll be here for about 30 minutes till 10:30 p.m. Eastern. If you have questions and you're watching this live, throw it in the chat. I know many of you can't make it live, so we're going to have this replay up, and you can watch this replay all day Saturday. If you have questions, you can always comment on this video or do what everyone else does and ask Jake questions in the Discord 30 minutes before lock. And Jake loves it. So occupyfantasy.com/Discord. You can also click the join button right below this video to get access to the Discord channel. So mention Jake at DFS_MMA on Twitter, owner of MMADFS.com, writer of the Occupy Fantasy UFC Daily Plug. Jake, happy Friday, man. What's up? Can you hear me, Jake? It looks like we might have lost Jake for a sec, so give me one sec here. So while we wait to get Jake's mic, let's see here. And Jake's going to come back here in a second. He's going to come back in. So again, we're going to be until 10:30 or so. The daily plug is up, occupyfantasy.com. And the Occupy model is up and running. Ranks every fighter, FanDuel, and DraftKings. And Jake's The Sheet at MMADFS.com is up and running. Looks like we still don't have Jake back yet, so no worries. We'll get his opinion here in a second. The plan for this show is to talk about the main event. McGregor versus Poirier. This is a rematch. What the difference is between last fight from a DFS standpoint and public perception. We're going to talk about some newcomers on the slate. We're going to talk about fights that you need to target in your DFS lineups. And we're going to talk about low-owned fighters to help you win the big prizes on FanDuel and DraftKings. Jake, are you back with me?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Don't see you on video. I don't know if that's a pro or con. We can't see you on video, but we can hear you now.
All right. Try now.
Cool. Jake's back. And little Friday night mishaps. So glad to have you back, Jake. What's up, man? I gave you the intro, gave you everything. How's it going?
Cool, man. Yeah, Friday night gremlins. What's going on, man? Just wrapping up like a 16-hour workday. So why wouldn't this crash, like, just to start it off? But yeah, glad to be here and glad that I was able to fix that. I don't know what was going on there.
Yeah, if you've been around for a while and you're watching this, you know that Moose normally handles our technical aspects of the show. I mean, it is very hit or miss when I handle it. I got to say, it's been pretty good lately, but, we were due for a technical mishap. I don't even know if it was my fault, but I'll take the blame, team player. So, Jake, while you were gone, talked about this main event, Poirier versus McGregor. Massive fight from just a fan standpoint. So let's think about it from a DFS perspective, because this is a rematch. This is the third time they fought. But you and I were talking earlier today. The interesting thing about this rematch is that it just happened. These two guys just fought each other, and that takes recency bias to a whole nother level.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I feel like everyone, normally recency bias, you're trying to look at like apples to oranges. Like literally people are here, they're looking at it. And I mean, they think they know exactly what will happen because they just saw this fight. Can you still hear me? I can't hear you right now.
You're good.
Okay, cool. Sorry. So I think right now, like everyone's like, all right, well, obviously McGregor's washed up. Like we just saw him lose. We just saw Poirier beat him. Like it was so easy. Like right now in people's minds, like outside of the diehard McGregor fans, I think like they're just so sure that the same thing's going to happen again. I mean, like recency bias on a rematch. I mean, like you said, it's just, I mean, it's exponentially greater than when you have recency bias on two unrelated events. So I think last time we looked at the exposure or the ownership, and we had McGregor at 68% owned on DraftKings, 71% on FanDuel. Poirier was 28% on DraftKings, just 20% on FanDuel. And at that time, that was 9,100 McGregor, 7,100 Poirier on FanDuel. They were $21 and $18. Now, they're the same price. And I think ownership's going to be about the same. We might see Poirier be slightly ahead, but we're definitely going to have the people that see McGregor and see him as a value, and then we're going to have the people with recency bias that see Poirier and just be like, oh, he's definitely going to win again, super value. Either way, last time we saw 96% combined exposure, and we're expecting something similar here. So I'm kind of curious on your take. Like, what's the, you're the king of GPPs. What's the play here? Like, what's your combined exposure where you can still get a little bit of an edge on the field if somehow, this fight doesn't end up in the optimal lineup, which is unlikely, but it's possible. I mean, you don't even need a disqualification or something. You get an early round 2 KO. You get one guy controlling the fight, and then the other guy, comes back with an early round 2, early round 3 KO, and, lower volume, something like that. So, I mean, what do you think the optimal target exposure is?
It's so tough, man. And believe me, like, I'm looking for every way possible to get unique in these big contests. And it depends on how comfortable you are with losing. The more comfortable you are, I'm very comfortable with it. You can play a little less. But the thing is, it makes it very tough for two reasons. One, on DraftKings, and I guess FanDuel too, they're priced exactly the same. And they're right in the middle of the pack. So even a lower scoring range of outcomes could still get into the optimal lineup because of their price. So that makes it really tough, one. Two, like last time, the fight was 95% owned or whatever, but we had a major leverage spot because McGregor took 68% of it, and we could just double up on Poirier. This time around, they're likely going to be the exact same amount, 40, 45%, whatever it is. So we can't even go over or under one guy. I guess one way to get leverage is to just pick a side and go 100% that fighter, 100% Poirier, 100% McGregor. I don't have any conviction as far as that goes. I think the best bet is probably play 80 to 90% if you're making 10 lineups. If you're just playing one lineup, Jake, I mean, you just play it. You play it, and then you'll figure out how to get different elsewhere. But fortunately, there's other places to get different, especially on DraftKings this week.
Totally. I mean, I think the only time you're fading this main event, is probably in 150 max. Maybe if you're doing 20 max, you do one, maybe two lineups without it. But totally. I think splitting the ownership is the move. Probably having like 90, maybe 95% exposure. The field's going to be right around 95. There's no real benefit to going to 100, just because, like, what does that extra few percent get you over the field? Where if you drop down to 90, you have twice as many lineups compared to the field that don't have it. So, you get some good chances. Could you imagine if this fight somehow, like, the winner scores, like, I don't know, like 85 points or something, and you're just like flying by everyone up the charts? I don't know. It's a great leverage opportunity, but it's super, super high risk.
Those are what dreams are made of. But for low risk contests, cash games, 50-50s, head-to-head double ups, right? This is like textbook stacking main event, right?
For sure. You have to stack it. Like, barring something super weird, like the winner is going to score over 100 points. If it ends quickly, the loser is not going to score well. But, lock in that 100-plus point score, and there's a decent chance, like, it's a really big score. But
exactly. So,
easy stack.
Right. So, all right, let's move on from the main event. I think it's pretty straightforward how to play it this week. We always like to dissect the UFC newcomers, and because that's normally where we can get an edge. They don't have official stats at UFC Stats. There's a lot of tape on these guys. Really no public opinion. We only have one true newcomer this week. It's Chris Moutinho, late replacement. Going to be fighting Sean O'Malley, is just like a massive underdog. But there are two other fighters, Jake, Amadovsky and Yat Song. They're fighting each other in one of the first fights of the night. I grouped them into this mix because neither one of them have fought for like 2 years, and they only had a couple of UFC fights, so most people probably don't even know who they are. So talk to me about these three fighters, their styles, and how they could end up optimal for DFS.
Yeah, that's fair. The only reason I knew who Ahmed Afsky was is I was like, wasn't that the one guy John Phillips knocked out before he got kicked out of the UFC? Like, that was the only reason I knew him. I was like, yeah, that is that guy. Like, John Phillips went 1-5 in the UFC, but this is the one guy that stood in the center of the octagon and got knocked out in 17 seconds against him.
Not a good look.
So that was one of his two UFC fights. And his previous UFC fight, he got absolutely dominated on the ground against Krzysztof Jotko, who is not good. So we got to see him both get dominated in wrestling. We got to see him get knocked out in 17 seconds. not a lot to love about this guy. And now he comes in at 9,000, and just like at this point, he's just like a negative 125 underdog. He was at the beginning of the week negative 145. DraftKings came out with the pricing actually last week, so he was a little bit more of a favorite then, but he's still overpriced even if you look at when the pricing did come out. But because we have so many close fights on this card, they had to make some people expensive just so everyone wasn't like between 7,700 and 8,300. So he is ridiculously overpriced. Really, the only reason to like him is the low ownership. You know, we're looking at single-digit favorite with a 33% chance to get a finish.
Yeah.
He hasn't fought in 2 years since that John Phillips knockout. And then he's going against Yao Zhang, who hasn't fought in 3 years. So, I mean, even longer. That guy probably shouldn't be in the UFC. So they had an event in Shanghai, China, and Yao Zhang had 3 fights under his belt. 2 of those came in like back-to-back days. He'd only been pro for a year. And they had a fighter drop out like right before that event took place. So they had to get a Chinese fighter, and they were looking for a heavyweight. And I imagine there aren't a ton of Chinese heavyweights available. And this guy happened to be there. You know, he was super young. He was like 21 years old, 22 years old, something like that. And they brought him in, and like he was going against like, you know, a not good fighter himself. And the guy looked terrible coming in at heavyweight. He looked so bad. He went for like a standing guillotine early in the fight. Didn't work out, got completely crushed, ended up getting beaten in the second round. Then he drops down to light heavyweight for his second fight. He looked a lot better at light heavyweight. Like, he shouldn't have been a heavyweight. He was like 230 pounds. Like, they probably pulled him out of the crowd for that first fight. Like, it was ridiculous. So then he drops down to light heavyweight. He probably should have won the decision at light heavyweight. It looked like he lost the first round, probably won the second 2 rounds. He was going against another guy that also just dropped down from heavyweight, so he didn't really have an advantage. But he looked okay. He didn't look good. And then now he's dropping down to middleweight, but it's been 3 years. He had a 10-month suspension for a banned substance. I don't think it was steroids. It was like some sort of something that was in a dietary supplement. So not super sketchy, but still, you know, not ideal.
Yeah.
Suspension, 3-year layoff. Dropping down to a new weight class. He still only has, 5 fights. Yeah, 3 pre-UFC fights, 2 in the UFC, lost them both. So he only has 5 pro fights. Like, we don't really know what we're getting out of him. He has a Greco-Roman background in wrestling. He's going to be 5 inches taller. But he's got really short arms, like 5 inches taller and 2 inches shorter reach. Like, he's got kind of T-Rex arms. So I don't know. I kind of like him. I think that's the play. I think that Amadovsky has looked terrible, and I'll take like the mystery door going against that. But I mean, this is a super high variance fight, and we say that a lot. Like, we don't really know what we're going to get, but we want to have exposure to both sides in high variance fights because there's a good chance someone's going to look terrible and someone else gets a finish. Like, just look at like Rick Glenn a few weeks ago. So those are those 2 guys. I'm actually pretty high in Yao Zhang, but that could totally backfire. Amadovsky could come out and knock him out. Who knows what's going to happen in that fight? But for DFS, high variance is good for tournaments. So definitely a fight we want to look at. And then looking at our actual newcomer, Sean O'Malley had been scheduled to face Smolka, which you know I was going to be on Smolka in that matchup.
Bro, he saved you so much money by dropping out of this fight.
Saved me or cost me, one of the two. It was gonna be on one end of the spectrum. But Smolka was definitely gonna attack him with leg kicks. That's all I'm gonna say. And I don't think that Latino is gonna throw any leg kicks or grapple. Like, I'm pretty sure Sean O'Malley went through like a phone book and found this guy based on his attributes and was like, I want to fight that guy. Like, this guy's he's gone 2-2 in his last 4 fights with 2 knockout losses. He doesn't throw leg kicks. He doesn't wrestle. He's the same exact height, same reach as Almeida, who O'Malley just completely controlled in his last fight. Latino just fought like 6 weeks ago or something. He ended up getting like a 3rd round submission against like a complete trash can. Fight before that was against a guy that had 3 pro fights to his name. Like, this guy has not been fighting high level competition. I'm not sure how he got the call up, but like literally, you had people like Ricky Simon, all these like Boom Kelleher were trying to fight O'Malley. Like, all these people were coming up saying they want to fight O'Malley, and then somehow Mutino gets the shot. Like,
Dude, they weren't going to give O'Malley a wrestler on pay-per-view. That wasn't going to happen.
Right. Yeah, they're going to give him a training dummy, and that's what he got.
So here's my takeaway from these three guys. I know we spent a lot of time on them, but the takeaway here is, let's think about this from a tournament perspective in DFS. And if you look here, I have the Occupy model pulled up. And you talked about Yatsong's line movement throughout the week. And now he's probably the most mispriced fighter on the entire slate. If you look at DraftKings, one of the best ways to look at mispricings, try to find mispricings, is in the Occupy model. Just sort by DraftKings salary and then compare the money lines. And if you look all the way down, Yatsong is a plus 110 underdog. The line has moved 40 cents in his favor. The fighters priced above him are plus 140, plus 160, plus 150, plus 140, plus 130. The next closest money line is Greg Hardy at 7,800. And if you look at finishing odds, the next closest fighter is Conor McGregor at 8,100. And so he's going to be pretty popular. Not like crazy popular because there are a bunch of dogs people like, but he's going to be 20+% owned. Whereas the favorite, again, you said is going to be 8%. So we have a high variance fight. We don't know the outcome, but the favorite is 8% owned. And the underdog is 25% owned, let's say. Easy decision for me in tournaments. I think low risk contests, Yatsong's the easy play because of the ownership and the money line. But Amedovski's a fantastic play in tournaments. And then Moutinho, absolute garbage fighter, right? No reason to play him except he's going to be 5% owned. We know we want exposure to low owned fighters. And Jake, there's the one takeaway here is O'Malley has hurt his foot in multiple fights. Could be a Chito Vera situation where he injures his foot again in the first round. I want to be on the side of a 5% fighter who has a guy who has a notorious foot injury.
I mean, that's totally fair. Totally fair. I mean, 33% of O'Malley's fights have ended with some sort of leg injury. We get 5% with Tino here. Like, I think O'Malley's going to have to hurt his own foot in this one, which could happen. Like, he throws a lot of kicks and he's got super like skinny legs. I mean, he could totally kick Moutinho and break his own leg. I mean, it could happen.
It could. So let's keep this rolling. It's 10:17. We're here till 10:30 for watching the replay. If you have questions, hop in the Discord afterwards or just comment on the video below. If you have questions while you're watching this live, throw them in the chat. All right, let's talk about fights we want to target. We already mentioned that Amedovski and Yatsong fight. Seems crazy, but it's a fight you definitely want to target. Obviously, the main event. Jake, which other fights are you looking at both sides to play in tournaments?
Yeah, so there's two big ones for me. It's going to be the Michelle Pereira, close enough, and Nico Price. That's a big one. So hard to see that fight going the distance. Like, Nico Price never goes the distance except for in his last fight. But prior to that, I think he had been to 10 or 11 fights in the UFC. None of them had gone the distance. And then the other one is going to be the Trevin Giles, Driscus Reliant on finish. I like Giles. I think he pulls the upset. He's the veteran. I thought Duplessis, he looked pretty tentative in his first fight. And then he goes and gets a first round KO against a guy that's never been finished. So I think those are my two big fights. Do you have any other ones that you want to add on to that?
I mean, it depends from if it's a good play or a bad play perspective. Because a bad play, I'll have exposure to probably the worst fights on the slate. As far as actually good fights you want to target, I think you hit the two on the head. Yeah, Giles and Duplessis is a big one. The other one, Price and Pereira, that's an easy fight to target as well. Other than that, there aren't really too many fights that should produce fireworks. And I think a good way to look at this, if we look at the Occupy model, 13-fight slate. Normally, Jake, we have a bunch of fighters over 100 OF index. We only have 3 this week out of 26. It goes to show that it's a relatively low volume, not as high finishing potential slate, especially in the larger octagon for pay-per-view. But generally when this happens, chaos ensues and we see a bunch of finishes. So if that happens, I'll be very happy.
Right.
So, all right, let's talk about some low-owned tournament fighters. Big prizes on both sites. FanDuel up their prizes. DraftKings has the $200K up top. Hopefully you've gotten some tickets to these events. If you do, you're looking for 1 to 2 to 3 low-owned fighters to put into your lineups to help differentiate yourself from the field. Jake, we talked about Amedovski. We talked about, that might be it actually. I think that's the only true low-owned fighter that we discussed. It is. So Talk to me. Fighters under 20% projected ownership on DraftKings that you're going to go over the field, you're going to have a lot of exposure to it, you think can help break the slate.
Yes, I like Trevin Giles. I think there's a pretty good chance he gets a finish there. Duplessis has never been to a decision in 17 pro fights. He's been pretty good. He's been 15-2, but at the same time, he's been knocked out once, submitted once. I think Giles is pretty solid, and he kind of flies under the radar. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, but he fainted before that Kevin Holland fight and screwed over a bunch of people in DFS. So I think people are still a little bit wary of him. And the field is going to be on Duplessis in this fight after he put up a massive, round one, 110-point DraftKings performance. I like Giles as a kind of a leverage option, especially on FanDuel where their price is the same. Whenever we see that happen, the underdog price the same as the favorite is always dramatically less owned. So I really like Giles on FanDuel especially, but I think he's a good play on DraftKings also. And then my gross options are Amari Akhmedov and Ryan Hall. They
you
just
went right
barely
for it.
low owned.
You didn't hold anything back. You went right for the super gross plays. Okay.
Yeah, I mean we're getting real gross there. The thing about Poirier is the only time we've seen him go to a third round, he looked absolutely exhausted against Zalal. So I'm kind of wondering here, if Ryan Hall can stretch this fight out, what does Poirier look like late in the fight? And maybe he's still fine because Hall spends most of his fights rolling around on the ground, which isn't really going to tire Poirier out. But, I mean, maybe somehow he does tire him out. Maybe Ryan Hall somehow lands a heel hook submission. Maybe he, Poirier's been talking a lot of shit all week. Maybe Hall kicks him in the face and knocks him out. Who knows? I mean, we got an experienced veteran facing a guy that's 2-0. One guy's 36 years old, a third or fifth degree black belt. The other guy's 24 years old in his third UFC fight. You never know. I like Poirier to win the fight. Don't get me wrong, but I think as low-owned gross plays, I think it could be worse than Ryan Hall. He can't score well in a decision, so he's going to need a finish. But, I mean, the dude is just ridiculous rolling around the mat and grabbing ankles and breaking people's knees. So, I mean, I think he has a chance. I don't love him. I like Poirier to win the fight again, but definitely in play. And then Akhmedov, he's going against Brad Tavares, who's been knocked out in 3 of his last 4 losses. Akhmedov finally got a finish after going to 7 straight decisions. He finished Tom Breeze, tough fighter. He ended up getting the submission. I mean, maybe Akhmedov knocks Tavares out, but I don't think either of those guys score well in decisions, just to be clear. Even Giles, I don't think he scores well in decisions. So, I mean, we're really trying to find low-owned guys that can get finishes here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, who are you looking at?
Yeah. So, I mean, first I got to say, if someone asks you, who should I play in DFS, and your finale or your conclusion is, it could be worse then I mean, that's right up my alley, right? That already means that play is super gross. So those guys I'm looking at, I'm pretty sure you know who I'm going to say, Jake. And
I know. It starts with Z and ends with Z, right?
So I'm a sucker for the high-priced, big favorite, low-owned fighters. And they're low-owned for a reason, right? Because they either haven't typically shown a ceiling, they're unknown, they're facing a tough opponent, the line's moved against them, whatever it may be. But we have a guy, we like to call him creative fighter because he looks like a super generic dude. But Double Z, Jamagulov, he is $9,300 DraftKings, $2,200 on FanDuel. We got him projected for 8% ownership on DraftKings, and he's minus 345 favorite, going against a guy that probably shouldn't be in the UFC. I'm not saying ZZ should be in the UFC either, but Rivera's been finished every step of the way. So for me, I think ZZ could have a big wrestling performance here. And again, a guy who's going to win the fight 75% of the time, but is only owned 8% of the time. Of that 75%, how many of those outcomes does he produce an outlier performance? Even if it's only 20%, 25%, then we're crushing the field if he does well. So he's a big guy that I'm going to have a ton of exposure to tomorrow. And then I think you like Jerome Rivera a little bit. You wrote him up in the betting plug as he could possibly win a decision. I think if he wins a decision actually at his price, then he could be useful too, and he's only 11% owned.
Yeah, I mean, that's possible. I included him in the betting plug because, I mean, plus 550 in a fight that's probably going to end in a decision seems too wide for one side. But I'm not super confident in Rivera. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I think ZZ probably wins a decision here. Rivera's been knocked out in 2 of his last 3 fights, but both of those came up a weight class. One of them was up 2 weight classes. He's never really been knocked out at 125 pounds. His one TKO came from like a dislocated elbow against Brandon Royval back in the day. So I think Rivera is tougher to finish at 125. You know, ZZ just every fight basically ends in a decision. But I mean, I hear you. Like 8% owned, like guy has a 24% finishing rate. I mean, that's a big gap right there. And then the other one we should probably mention is Yana Kenitzka after Aldana missed weight by 3.5 pounds. You know, Yana's projected at 18% ownership. That could go up a little bit after the weight miss. I sent you a couple of screenshots right before we hopped on here. I was looking at face-offs. So Aldana is listed at 5'9" and Kenitzka is listed at 5'6". Yana legit looked taller than Aldana in that picture. Like, am I crazy or are they about the same height?
Yeah, man, we can't trust those listed height and weights. So, but yeah, I mean, Aldana, she missed what by like 3.5 pounds. That was the only big significant weight miss this week, right?
Yeah, that was the only weight miss. You know, it's a 135-pound fight. She showed up at 139.5, so 3.5 over the extra pound allowance. You know, Kenitzka is always a better play on DraftKings because what she does is push people up against the fence and land like 300 significant or insignificant strikes and only like 40 significant. So for me, she's kind of DraftKings specific because I still don't really think she gets a finish. But, you know, if Aldana sort of gets worn out, it's really hard to say if she went through a tough weight cut or if she just didn't even try to cut it because she didn't weigh in last. I think she was like the 7th to last to weigh in. Like, you know, when people weigh in last and then they look bad and then they miss, it's like a super red flag.
Right.
Aldana didn't look terrible, but she missed and she was kind of dejected, but she kind of weighed in at the middle of the pack. But she could still tire out late in the fight if it was a tough weight cut. So maybe Kenitzka just pushes her up against the fence and gets 200 total strikes and, you know, puts up another 100-point score on DraftKings.
Frankly, I loved her score last time. Helped me win the 100K on that one slate. So, yeah, her DraftKings ability has a special place in my heart, that's for sure. And we do have a question in the chat about Max Griffin. We haven't talked about him or that fight with Condit, but I like Griffin a lot. The model is a big fan of him. Some of the underlying metrics in this fight like Griffin. And he's a minus 190 favorite. We project him for less than 20% ownership. Jake, I don't know if you agree with me here, but I probably like him as a better play than Maya priced above him and Tavares priced below him.
I mean, I definitely like him better than Tavares. So I was really big on Max Griffin. For anyone that's been following us for a while, they probably remember, like, I had Max Griffin written up in his last fight. I was like, this guy's due. Like, He got screwed in a decision where he would have scored 107 points. You know, this guy's punching guys' ears off. Like, I mean, he's good. Like, he's a legit fighter. Like, he went through a tough period where he went 2-5 in 7 straight decisions. 2 of those were split. He couldn't catch a break, but he was like a legit fighter who had, you know, he had some, like, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but he definitely had a win coming his way. He had some variance coming his way. There we go. But now I feel like this is a much tougher matchup. He's going against Condit, who's been knocked out once in 45 fights, and that came from a knee injury against Tyron Woodley. So Max Griffin's pretty much a knockout guy. He has 2 submissions on his record, but they came earlier in his career. Condit's so hard to knock out. I mean, 45 fights, you never get knocked out. I mean, he's 37 years old now, but
until
I think it's a hard... Yeah, until Saturday, you know. I mean, it's always like never until it happens.
Right,
but...
right.
But at the same time, I mean, you know, Condit's taller. He's got like a 3-inch height advantage. Griffin has a 1-inch reach advantage. Condit's super hard to hit. He only absorbs 2.49 significant strikes per minute on average. Like, he's kind of like an awkward, unorthodox fighter. He has a lot of weird motions. It's hard to hit him. Like, you know, most guys don't knock him out. He has been submitted 6 times, but Griffin hasn't submitted anyone in a while. So I think it's a hard matchup for Griffin to really go off, but I think he probably wins and he probably scores like 80, 85 points in a decision, which at his price isn't really going to return value, but I would say he's got a safe floor.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, we've already hit the 10:30 mark. We've flown through the show 30 minutes. We got to close it out with our parlay of the week. We're still looking for our first big ticket win. So, Jake, give me your side of the parlay of the week.
Yeah, I'm going to go Michelle Piera inside the distance at plus 165.
All right, plus 165, Michelle Piera to finish the fight. And I'm going to go with Trevin Giles inside the distance. What odds did we get his inside the distance at?
That should be plus 320, which when you combine those two should be plus 1,013. So just over 10 to 1 on that.
Just got to hit that 3 times and we're back to even for the year. So, if you like what you saw today, make sure you click the subscribe button. Get notified whenever we release any new videos. NFL's coming right around the corner. We're going to have tons of new videos, so make sure you subscribe to the channel to get notified. Give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the UFC content. If you have any questions, hop in our Discord channel. You click the join button here below, occupyfantasy.com/discord with instructions on how to join. Or if you're watching this replay, just comment below the video. We'll hop back in, answer them on Saturday afternoon. And that should do it. For Jake, follow him at DFS_MMA on Twitter. Go to MMADFS.com. Read the sheet where he breaks down every single fight on the card, betting and DFS implications. Then hop over to OccupyFantasy.com. Read our daily plug. Jake's top plays, lineup-specific strategies for FanDuel and DraftKings, his best bets that have been crushing all year. And then check out our Occupy model, which you see on the screen here. It ranks every fighter, FanDuel and DraftKings. Updates live when betting odds change. Jake, any final thoughts?
I think it's going to be a really fun slate. I think it's going to start slow. I'm kind of surprised the UFC started a pay-per-view slate with a fight between two guys I haven't fought in 3 years, ZZ Rivera, Brad Tavares Akhmadev, and Maya Ai. But after that, things are really going to get going. So don't give up 4 fights in.
Those are the fights we're going to be paying attention to, buddy, with all the low ownership. So for Jake, I'm Brian. You can follow me on Twitter at BrianJesterFF. Follow us at Occupy Fantasy. Once again, appreciate everyone listening. Good luck tomorrow night, and we'll talk to you soon.